One man went to mow a meadow. That's right, kids. Welcome to episode 26 of That Guy's a Maniac, the podcast. The podcast brought to you by the team behind the world's second best video games blog, www.thatguys.co.uk. We put these out weekly and we talk about a bunch of video games, normally video games that came out in the 90s with a smattering of earlier stuff, and then perhaps one or two recent games that the young kids may have actually played. I am your host, Kanzi11, aka Farley, and I am joined by Richie. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Richie.
Where else can you find our thoughts on video games?
Well, we can be found in all the usual places such as Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at That Guy's a Maniac. We can also be found now on YouTube, again at That Guy's a Maniac. And yeah, that's it. Feel free to drop us a DM. We'll get to it in due course.
Yes. Thanks, Richie. And we couldn't pull together this technical wonder show just off our own backs. Is there anyone supporting us in this honest endeavour?
This honest endeavour technical wonder show. This week, well, we have This One's Intimate Apparel for all your interstellar crewmate relationship trust factor building needs, and I assume also some intimate clothing. That's This One's Intimate Apparel. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, This One's Intimate Apparel. We couldn't do it without you. So, Richie, this week we are talking about space games. Now, that is a broad church, so I'm going to try and narrow it down. So we're not just talking about every single game based in space. I'm thinking specifically about ones where you fly about in a ship, dogfighting, doing barrel rolls, and so not games like, I don't know, Dead Space, Starship Downrange, Sentient, Adrift, Tacoma.
Yeah, like games.
Actually
yeah. Spaceship games more than games set in space.
Yeah, and it was when we were talking about this before. It's a really poorly defined genre. So I was just looking up some of the games that we're probably going to talk about and seeing what genre kind of Wikipedia had them listed as. And here's just a selection. So, you know, games where you're sat in a cockpit flying around. Shooters, action adventure, space combat simulator, rail shooter, survival games. So a real mix, and there's not really one concrete definition that encapsulates everything. There are also some games where you can, you know, hop in a spaceship and then it's a space combat simulator, or it's actually an open world thing when you're on the ground. So some of those will be in the mix first, I guess. But you particularly have a penchant for genre and game definition. So what were some of the things you'd pull out to define this genre?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I think my definition would be spaceship game rather than space game. And I know I just said that, but there is a big difference between a game set in space, such as our sponsor's namesake is the Mass Effect. So, like, yes, it's a game set in space. It's a space opera. Is it a space game? Yes. Is it a spaceship game? Probably not. So, I mean, that's where it kind of differs in there. So I'm gonna just give it that blanket term: spaceship games.
Spaceship games. I'm a huge fan of this genre, and there's tons of stuff if you're on the PC from your kind of if we imagine a spectrum of spaceship games, from your kind of hardcore space simulator, so, you know, space station building simulator games where you're scooting about in space with a welding gear to weld your stuff together, which will involve some spaceship type stuff, through to on the other extreme there's just a slew of mobile space shooters. I don't know why this genre has kind of found a home in mobile games. I guess it's because it's easy to control.
Yeah, that's simply it. It's that whole flying a ship through space, but by actually just sort of like moving your thumb around in there, it gets that sort of Minority Report feel control to it, I think that's exactly it.
So there's been a lot of recent games on the Switch and PlayStation 4 which are ports of mobile games, and they don't port very well. They're okay, solid 6 and 7s, but not outstanding examples of the genre, I think. And so we used to have loads of these, and I used to love playing them. And then it seems like there was the well dried up, and then recently, as I've mentioned a couple of times on the poddy, there's been a bit of a renaissance in spaceship games, some of which we'll be mentioning. But here's Kanzi11's list of things which don't necessarily make a spaceship game, but make a good spaceship game. Not all of the games we're talking about have these, but most of them do. And they're in no apparent order. There's just a few things I jotted down. So number 1 is you absolutely must, some don't and it bugs me, be able to have a cockpit view mode.
yeah, fair enough. I get you. That sort of first person, sort of looking down at your controls. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Even though in most of spaceship games, cockpit mode is the worst mode to play it in.
Oh, absolutely.
Partly because for detailed ones you have the inside beading of your windshield, for want of a better word. Half the screen's taken up with dashboards with things on, and so it just becomes a game of trying to orientate your ship to make the little red triangles or whatever sit in the middle. So really disorienting. Much better to play it in third person, but to have the option to jump into cockpit mode is one of those things that I think should be a hallmark of the genre.
Yeah.
Number 2 is you should be able to move your ship in all directions. Rotating all around, but also you should be able to do barrel rolls, so flip one wing over the other, and also do loop-de-loops. And a lot of these crappy mobile games don't allow you to do that. Or worse, in my opinion, is they auto level you, which I really don't like at all. I don't mind if there's a button which will kind of auto level you. So if you're really just lost, particularly if you're heading towards some objective, you just auto level and it kind of rights your ship. But that's the brilliant thing about this genre. And I don't know if you've ever read Ender's Game. There's a whole bit in Ender's Game about thinking about the battlefield in a different way, because you're not on a 2-dimensional plane, you're on 3 dimensions. And so for some of the best spaceship games, that sense of turning up, around, over, back on yourself really makes for it, rather than kind of developers saying, this is what you will be looking at.
Exactly.
And this is down.
You can see the thinking behind that, because one thing I would say is dogfighting in some of these games is frustrating at the very, very least. Sometimes it can be really, really sort of hit or miss. You feel a little bit like the stormtroopers in Star Wars. You're unable to sort of hit anything. You're trying to lock onto targets. You're trying to do that. So I can see the gaminess factor as to why that they've evolved this kind of auto leveling and sort of pursuit controls and stuff like that in there. Just saying, you know.
Yeah. And for much of dogfighting, I guess, you know, it can be better or worse depending on the fluidity of the controls. But if fundamentally you don't like, you know, as I mentioned earlier, chasing the red triangle on your screen, right? So it flies past the middle, and then you're trying to find it again, and it will fly across the other way, and then you're trying to find it again before you kind of hit the trigger button. Then perhaps the space combat isn't necessarily for you, but exploration might well be. So that freedom of movement is a must. Number 3, some kind of boost system that, you know, does the Star Trek, Star Wars, stars streaming tunnel type thing.
Hyperspace or warp drive or something like that. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, those terms, hyperspace and warp drive, are just liberally used everywhere. So I think, fortunately, it's one of those terms that George Lucas patent or whatever. So yeah, something like that to make your zoomy ship zoom even faster. Number 4 is kind of a sub rule. It doesn't necessarily need to be set in space.
Ooh, control fucking versial. Right, okay. Give me your reasoning here.
Well, it's because I think there are, if we think of games like Colony Wars, Jedi Starfighter, and the one that really sticks in my mind, and it was a formative spaceship game for me, is Descent and Descent 2, which have some of that. So Descent has, in my opinion, the best movement options in any spaceship game. And the way that levels are designed, because you're mostly flying about in subterranean levels, is they really make the most out of your movement options. So you are exploring these tunnels which go all over the place, and it is a sheer pleasure once your kind of mind and controller sync up to you know, be rotating in all kinds of directions. And then of course, it's not just about zooming around in space. You can be zooming around on the surface of planets, or in some games you transition between the two, which I really like. So I would say you don't necessarily have to be set in space to be a
space game. Okay, a spaceship game.
Ship game.
Yeah, so that adds more fuel to that definition of the genre.
Yeah, you can be in a spaceship, but you don't necessarily have to be in space. Another thing which comes as standard, and I was trying to think of some non-violent spaceship games. There aren't that many, or none. In fact, none of the ones on my list are non-violent spaceship games. But you're more than likely rocking some kind of dual cannon, so one on each wing, and when you fire, you're firing from both of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, is the definition of, or does your list include
machine gun? But yeah, the dual. Imagine doing a barrel roll. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say.
And then the last one, which is very rare. Yeah.
Does your list include actually just the term dogfight? Does a spaceship game have to have dogfighting in it? I suppose that's regardless of dual cannons or whatever. Is it just actually having fighting?
I don't know. I quite like unfortunately, two games which probably will sit on in front of most people's mind: Elite and No Man's Sky. I haven't actually played, so I don't know if those are necessarily about dogfighting or not. They can be. I don't know. So I wouldn't say necessarily needs to be dogfighting. And in fact, I'd be all up for more kind of exploratory type ones. Or I'm sure they already exist. Actually, we were talking a while ago about the truck simulators.
Yeah.
So whether there is some space hauling simulator where you just I can't imagine it'd be very interesting though, right? Because you just got the void of space to. Well, I mean,
one thing that we should probably sort of address is that part of why this podcast even exists was because we were chatting, or meant to chat, about Frontier Elite 2 from our Amiga podcast, which was episode 23, and
Yeah.
in that one, I don't think you have lasers. I don't think you fight at all. Yeah, it's just straight up. It is a space trading simulator, and it's a space station docking simulator to the soundtrack of a MIDI version of Blue Danube. I would say that it's almost a non-violent one, except for the subtext that you actually some of your cargo can just be like slaves, and if you get caught, you get shot by the police, sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like that's definitely when you were talking about the formative one, you're talking about Descent. I would say probably go back earlier. Frontier Elite 2 was the sort of space game to sort of that kind of defined it for me as well. Like, it was so cool just to be able to like fly past Earth and Mars, and go into these planets in a system, and then go to another system with other alien planets there as well, and just kind of see this stuff as you're flying through it. I thought that was quite cool. But yeah, I would say that's probably more of a formative one for me. But yeah, I mean, like, that existed as a simulator, trading simulator, if anything, which is probably set a precedent for most other games that you see nowadays as well, including Elite. And again, I haven't played any of the later Elites either.
No, I've not touched the what is it, remake, or the whatever it was, 2018 version of Elite.
Yeah, no. But there's like a million of them, is there not? Elite Dangerous and all this sort of stuff. Or is that?
Yeah. I'm not too sure, because as I say, I rarely play PC games, so a lot of it has been going on on the PC side of things, mostly just from console perspective. My last point on what makes a good space game, and this is very much a wish list point, so I don't begrudge games that don't have this, is that you can the ability to change your ship configuration. I don't know why we don't see this more. So with like the in-flight, so with like the X-wing, where they have the wings down, wings up mode. I really like that. Tap of a button, and then all of a sudden you're in combat mode or something. You rarely see it. So I think that's my list of things which make for a very good space game, or the things I like to see in the best of the spaceship games. Would you add anything to that list?
No, I think it's pretty definitive. I tend to agree that those are the things that make a spaceship game, and things that you definitely like what you were talking about, spaceship customization there. I actually thought you just meant actual customization, because if I remember correctly, a lot of these games, and even like Frontier, you could like upgrade and buy new ships and get new weapons and get that sort of thing. Is that what you were meaning as well? It's just sort of the X-wing transformation as well, or?
No, I wasn't. Although it is now a staple of many spaceship games, I think, almost to the point where, if you're playing an RPG, you'd expect a character creator at the very front of it. It's the same with many modern spaceship games. Is that, and some of them to a ridiculous detail. You can update your shields and your drive and your weapons and the shape of your spaceship, and normally it's unlocking different spaceships and different bits to put into it.
Do you know, it's really weird. All I can think about right now is Kingdom Hearts, the gummy ship.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had it right down at the bottom of my list in case we got through the podcast without mentioning it. But I did say we have to give an honourable mention to the. I mean, they were just fucking awful, right? That section, but the gummy ship sections in Kingdom Hearts. So
yeah.
For those who haven't played Kingdom Hearts, care to explain the gummy ship?
Oh
system
god! So
and
there
who-
was
who
basically.
puts them together.
Oh yeah, so I think you speak to Sid from Final Fantasy VII, and he like creates the gummy ships, and basically the gummy
No,
ships.
Isn't it Chip and Dale?
Oh, I think Sid definitely is involved because the first ship you get is like the Highwind or something stupid like that. I don't know. It's been so long since I played Kingdom Hearts. Maybe Chip and Dale do Kingdom Hearts 2? But this is well researched stuff here. Go listeners! Hey.
Why did you bring up a counterpoint? No, Chip and Dale are responsible for your ship customization.
Are they? Well, Sid's definitely involved at some point.
Well.
They pilot it, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna address their competency to do that. But yeah.
Also, some phenomenal. just googling this. Some phenomenal constructions, including an X-wing, a Porygon. Someone's made like a Meta Knight. Wow, some really creative. Carry on.
I remember when it came out, you would make all of these ridiculous ones, and they had them online as well. Of course, when it first came out, you were waiting for a JPEG to load in order to actually see the ship that you were going to try and make. But yeah, sorry, the traveling between all of the Disney worlds, so between Nightmare Before Christmas World or Tarzan World or whatever, involved, at least the first time, doing the gummy ship run. And as you went through, you got a very basic gummy ship, and it was a sort of 3D shooter / avoider thing, and you shot things, and as you did it, things would explode and you would get more gummy bricks to make your gummy ship. And basically it was gated in that sort of fashion. As you unlocked more levels, you would unlock more difficult gummy ship runs, so you could get more kinds of bricks. And then basically you were looking for like the high level shooty guns, or the high level collect the bricks or the high level boosts at the back, and I think you also had a turbo boost as well. So basically you would get all of these different bricks or blocks, and you would mush them together to create a cockpit, a boost, a thing that collected all of the gummy bricks around you, and a thing that you could shoot all of the things come towards you, so you could collect more gummy bricks. And that was basically it. And it was like a 3-4 minute sort of session where you would just, in between these worlds, navigate there. And I think it had some secrets, like if you had certain things, you could like go in a different way to a different world or things like that. But it was a fairly straightforward, just in between actually getting to, Little Mermaid world or whatever.
Yeah. And what I remember, just from Kingdom Hearts 1, because I think it also appeared in 3 and possibly 2, is all of that. This whole minigame is completely unnecessary. You could just you just build the shittest ship, made sure it had some weapons in a cockpit, and you could, it wasn't especially challenging to do. It just seemed like an unnecessary minigame to put into Kingdom Hearts. I don't think it really added much to the game at all. That's all I remember. I remember just building some really horrible, unstreamlined, ugly, blocky thing with lots of cannons on the front and boosters on the back. And I think that just did me the whole game. So shout outs to the gummy ship. So you mentioned Frontier Elite. I mean, I guess probably one of the earliest spaceship games that people might think of is the Star Wars arcade machine.
Yep, I remember that. There used to be a pub in Glasgow called Bar Jedi.
Really?
Yeah, shit, It's one of these cursed pubs which every couple of years gets a new owner. But Bar Jedi, and it basically just had the Star Wars, what's it called, arcade machines in there, and I'm sure they play the Cantina music regularly. But yeah, it was just it was a Star Wars themed bar, and again, it's probably quite age telling because I think this was around sort of 2000 time of legal drinking age as well.
Yeah, there's that arcade machine. I mean, I don't know what the name of it is. Has become somewhat iconic. So it pops up in loads of different things. So if anyone's doing like a Netflix show that's supposedly themed in the 80s, then you'll undoubtedly see this machine somewhere. Star Wars arcade game.
Yeah.
I was also watching the other day the Runaways. The Marvel, one of the Marvel series, and that rather prominently has a Star Wars arcade game as a plot device.
Oh wow! Are Marvel and Star Wars part of the same franchise? But anyway,
do you know what I was? This is a slight aside to this, but the product placement of everything in the Disneyverse is getting a little bit ridiculous. I watched Wreck-It Ralph 2 the other day.
Yeah, I like that one. Wreck-It Ralph breaks internet or whatever it is. Yeah.
And he goes to the Star Wars hub, and isn't Star Wars brilliant? The Disney kind of owning everything. They just prominently product place whatever, so if you're watching something Marvel, there'll be something Star Wars and something Disney in it. If you're watching something Disney, there'll be something Marvel or something Star Wars in it.
Yeah.
And I was all for that. I thought, that'd be good. Some of these dream crossovers. But I was watching Runaways, then watched Wreck-It Ralph. I was like, this is a bit. I don't need Star Wars and Disney and Marvel in everything.
Were you watching it on Disney Plus?
Yeah, I was.
Well, there you go. I think you bring your own as your own funeral. You just kind of have to expect it if you're watching it on Disney Plus.
Yeah, well, I guess, but those are all fairly recent things. But yeah, it was a bit. Thinking about it, it was a bit, rammed down your throat. Hey, look, we own all these things, aren't they all cool, kids?
Yeah, I know. It's like. It's the whole thing of like making the new Disney princesses, like like Lisa from The Simpsons is now technically a Disney princess, and Deadpool and all that sort of stuff.
I have no time for those debates at all.
Yeah, no. I mean, it is pointless. It is a masked way of saying has been bought by a massive monopoly, and yet another thing that you have to buy to stream content. Fuck it, man. Anyway, grumpy old man aside, we were talking about spaceship games.
We were talking about spaceship games, and I guess Star Wars Arcade is one of those ones, bit of a cultural touchstone. But Star Wars has delivered us quite a few decent spaceship games.
Right, before you jump straight in, like, I'll be honest, when we were discussing the space games, I was like, yeah, I like space games. I like the idea of space games specifically for a lot of the reasons that you came up with on your list. And I was thinking, right, okay, I'm going to have a look through my catalogue at these space games so I can research it for this podcast. Yes, listeners, we do sometimes do research.
2 minutes before we start recording.
Yeah, 2 minutes before we start.
In fact, if you listen carefully, you can hear Richie researching the podcast during the podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not like we don't both have Google open just in case. Right now I'm sitting on the Kingdom Hearts wiki page, as are you, I'm sure. But yeah, no. And what I struggled to find was actually any spaceship games on my list. So I know the irony of me saying, "Well, let's do a podcast all about space things." And like, there's very few recent ones that I actually have or own or can even really think of a name recently. I was looking at my 360 collection of games, because it just sits on a shelf here, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing space ship related. So I started thinking, where did it all come from? And most of my spaceship games are pretty much all Star Wars games. Just to sort of jump back to what you were originally saying. So most of what I have to talk about here when it comes to spaceship games are just basically Star Wars games. And that's it, really. But yeah, sorry, you were going to talk about Star Wars games.
Yeah. We've had quite a few decent ones, and a couple of not so decent ones. So one of probably the best loved series is Rogue Squadron, which I'm sure you must have played.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Rogue Squadron on the N64 and the GameCube, probably some of the best spaceship games there have ever been. I remember one of them being a bit ropey, maybe number 3, because it did have sections where you had to get out of your X-Wing or your A-Wing or whatever and run around, and that was a bit gimpy, as you might imagine.
Rogue Squadron was definitely on the N64, because I think after Rogue Squadron 2 and so forth was on the GameCube. So I think we only had Rogue Squadron 1 on the N64, and it actually falls into your category of not being in space. It was really weird. I was thinking about it and I thought, I remember it had some kind of dogfighting, and then I realised no, it didn't. It was all like just shooting TIE bombers or escorting transports on Tatooine or Endor or wherever they were going. I think there was one which was set in Cloud City, which had a fake ceiling and a fake floor. So it still wasn't really in space.
As opposed to a real Cloud City. What do you mean?
As in, so it was set in Cloud City, as in,
So essentially, it's a terrestrial level, just the floor texture and the ceiling texture.
Yeah, so the floor texture was a cloud that you can't fly through. That sort of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of that kind of just playing through that, and it was great. I loved Rogue Squadron. The music was immense, and that's one of the few games that I can sort of say was immense, because it was just sort of remixes of John Williams stuff, and it would get really, really intense when you're like trying to shoot down bombers or whatever else, or AT-ATs, and recreating all of these things. And that was a really, really good spaceship game. But not set in space, weirdly.
Yeah. Did you ever play X-Wing versus TIE Fighter?
No, I didn't.
That was also very good. And I think, so for me, zipping around in a X-Wing is probably what I think of when I think of spaceship games. And I'm sure we're not the first podcast to ever mention it. Just the designs of the TIE Fighter and the X-Wing is just so solid. So solid crew, I'm going to go as far as saying.
Oh god, you get 21 seconds to go.
It's really good to you can tell the difference between the shit. I don't know, it's amazing to me that it's landed on this really solid spaceship concept designs, and I don't think we've ever seen the duality of spaceship designs quite like it. And the TIE Fighter is such a wacky thing.
Fucking hell, listen to us, the duality of spaceship design.
Yeah, well, as a pair, as a cat, almost as characters themselves. And of course you've got like an army of A-wings and Y-wings and TIE streakers and TIE butter balls and whatever, but just those two are really good. And even when I guess they must know it, because the trailers for things like Rogue One and the latest 3 films prominently featured X-Wings flying above the Earth level.
Yeah.
Oh, get the shivers, get the tingles going there. So Road Squadron was excellent. Shout outs because we're fucking boring old farts and we say the same old shit that everyone says.
It's phenomenal. It's sassy.
Was couch co-op.
It was phenomenal couch co-op.
And it is a thing because it is a thing in that sort of fashion.
It's a thing in that sort of fashion.
It's a thing. Rogue Squadron was a thing. Sorry, we're just picking up each other's lazy vocal spaghetti that we occasionally get into. It was couch co-op. Anyway, that's what I was getting to. It was couch co-op, and it was very good, and it was very hard. So myself and Chuff72, I could not get out of the Death Star. We could get into the Death Star and shoot the reactor, but we could never get out. In I think Rogue Squadron 2, and there is a GameCube memory card floating around somewhere that still has that last level.
I remember like how people were talking about how ridiculously hard that was. But again, I think that was because of what I mentioned before about dogfighting getting really hard in video games as well. Because like especially with like Rogue Squadron and stuff like that, trying to get a lock on and trying to shoot things, you literally did feel like the stormtrooper that just can't shoot anything. There was a lot of shit like that, and sometimes you would just get like charged with this ridiculous level where you had to play as like a Y bomber or something like that and get stuck with this shit, and like, oh really, I'm stuck as a Y bomber and all I can do is hit the ground, okay. Yeah.
We played this together, but you may not have memories of it. Jedi Starfighter on the PlayStation 2.
Oh wow! Why would I not have memories of that, Farley?
Frequently, we mention games that we witnessed each other playing, or were sat in the same room playing, and one or the other of us doesn't have a memory of it. Which wasn't there were quite a few. They really went all out when Episode 1 came out. So there was Super Bombard Racing, and Jedi Starfighter, and they were, okay-ish games. But I do remember flying around on generic-looking planets in an A-wing, the ridiculous targeting reticule, shooting whatever.
Yeah, that's speaking of target reticules, that's something I also remember from a lot of dogfighting, specifically space games as well, is you tend to get like a line of them, so you'll get one big one near you, a slightly smaller one for like medium distance, and then a tiny one for far away, and you're supposed to use that to try and gauge how far a thing is away from you, and also where you should be shooting along that sort of target. Yeah, messed up, messy, and I don't think it's meant for the casual gamer at all. That is hardcore stuff.
Well, I think this is why I mentioned earlier with the descent and the kind of you could flip the ship in any direction, and why some of these games reduce those movement options is because unless you're familiar with flight sims and spaceship games, I think they could probably be some of the most difficult to pick up. With harden the flight options and the boost and the constantly kind of moving around when you're chasing things dogfighting. So I think there are some nods in these less simmy-like interfaces just to make them playable by people who aren't huge flight simulator fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Special shout out as well, whilst we're on Star Wars games, to Battlefront, when they introduced those levels set in space, where you could hop into a vehicle, essentially go through no man's land of everyone else flying around and two big ships destroying before getting into the enemy's base and then kind of taking out their reactor. those were fun. Many hours spent on Battlefront 2, I think, doing that.
I actually have a couple of other shout outs in the Star Wars vein as well, just whilst we're here. Well, I mean, I would say the very, very original SNES Return of the Jedi. I don't know if you played that one at all. And I think this was probably the first exposure to, like, I mean, obviously it's a SNES, it was shit, it was awful, but it was kind of this 3D travelling through a tunnel. The final level was the end of Return of the Jedi, and spoilers, it's where Lando and the wee kind of guy with the flaps on his face have to fly into the fully operational Death Star, and they blow up the core, and then they have to fly back out. So you have to do this in SNES graphics, and ultimately what you have to do is fly through this tunnel, and there will be occasional sides to the tunnel which you can't bump into, so you have to try and navigate away, or you have to spin your ship ever so slightly.
Pipes.
Yeah, pipes, lots of pipes, and you have to spin your ship ever so slightly as well to get into different tunnels which are orientated for some reason at 45 degrees to the previous tunnel, and yeah, you just have to sort of navigate through that. It was fucking tough as nails, and I believe you could only just really remember that you're going to go left, then you need to go right, then you need to go up, you need to go down, and to spin, and then you would actually get it. You could never really do it on the fly. It had to be a thing where you had to die over and over and remember it and then get it right. And then, just to make things worse, you have to do it again, but in reverse, with flames occasionally just sort of covering your screen as well.
Exactly. I mean, exactly the same bit that me and Chuff 72 got stuck on with Rogue Squadron.
Yeah.
It was hard enough getting in. You were going in the Death Star. One of us was an X-Wing, one of us is Lando and Flapface Man. And yeah, getting through was difficult enough. There were also, I'm not sure this was in the SNES game, there were also TIE fighters thrown in there as well, so occasionally they'd be...
You know what? You. Yeah, probably, yeah.
and then you had to do it in reverse, but you had to boost, otherwise you'd get consumed by the fire, and that was... Yeah, I think we got in and destroyed it, but we never managed to get out.
Yeah.
Because one or two of us would get trapped behind a pipe, or chipped away by a X-Wing, or just slam into
a pipe. Yeah. But again, another shout out is on the N64, which is exactly the same thing that you've just said, and exactly the same thing that I was saying on the SNES. Is what's it called? The Shadows of the Empire.
I never played that.
Well, Shadows of the Empire, I mean, I don't know what it is with a lot of these games, or at least I'm just sort of thinking back about this now. It was like Return of the Jedi, it had several different genres in that game. I mean, ultimately it was a platformer, but it started off with you sort of running a land speeder, and then it became a platformer. And then you also got the chance to be on like sorry, go on.
Just looking up screenshots of Shadows of the Empire, and that is an N64 game.
yeah, really, really is.
Yeah, I think that's, if you had to encapsulate what was the N64 like with one screenshot, it's probably going to be a screenshot from Shadows of the Empire. Yeah, your character's basically a stack of 9 blocks. Everything's foggy. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
I forget what I was saying. Oh yeah. Like yes, Return of the Jedi SNES had so many genres in it. So like you start off in the land speeder, and then I think you do like some platforming levels like on Jabba's skiff. And then you've got like the speeder race through the Forest of Endor, and you got things like that all the way through it. And then the end of it is the what's it called? the escape from the Death Star that I mentioned before. But Shadows of the Empire did the same thing. Like, the very first level is you're playing one of this other guy, Dash Rendar. I don't know why I remember that. Can't remember fucking. Never mind, but I remember his name.
Can't remember kings and queens, the counties of the world, capitals of the world. However,
can't remember my own phone number.
N64 stars, Shadows of the Empire.
Anyway, so you play as him, but he's also like a player in the Battle of Hoth. So you start off in your A-Wing, or is it the A-Wings that they use in the Battle of Hoth? I don't know. Snow speeders.
Speeders.
Yeah, it's a little speeders. So you do that, and you start off, and you do the whole getting the rope onto the AT-ATs and tying them up so that they fall down, and then you get to shoot them. And you do that several times, and it's hard, and then you're dogfighting a little bit, and it's one of these games where you're playing it, and I think it's because it was N64, everything was kind of inverse, so you end up just sort of like smacking your ship off the ground, and you do that bounce, and it flashes. But yeah, then it turned it. But then after
to tie the cable around the legs of the AT-ATs.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Different games, and it's never felt good. Never felt good. It's always been awkward.
Yep. No, it's always a feat of learning how to do the controls, and then just as you actually get a hold of the controls, you then attach a rope to the fucking AT-AT, and then the camera will change, so you have the cinematic view. And you're like, shit, how do I control the fucking thing? But yeah, with Shadows of the Empire, you also then, it turned into like a third person, where you run about in the complex, and it's all great music. As much as it does look like a stick, you do fight like actual ATSTs, and you fight Boba Fett and IG-88, and you run through, but it has quite a few space scenes with your co-pilot, I think that last one, you've kind of got a pseudo. It looks like the Millennium Falcon, but it's not the Millennium Falcon sort of ship doing exactly that run as you go through a Death Star of some kind. But you know,
the Centurion Eagle.
Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
as an alternative.
Yeah.
A knockoff.
But yeah, I think that's where a lot of my space fighting games, spaceship games experience comes from. Is definitely the Star Wars universe. I think I just wanted to give a quick nod to those ones as well.
Yeah, but
I say
nod,
quick.
you mean half the podcast.
Half the podcast, yeah.
In fact, let's just not talk about anything else. Okay, so that's Star Wars. We're done with Star Wars now. Thank you, Star Wars, for giving us so many good spaceship games. Pod Race is also really good as well. On the N64, nothing to do with spaceships.
Jedi Power Battles.
Save it for the Star Wars episode.
We've done that now.
Did you ever play Descent? It was Descent or Descent 2. It was one of the ones that was on.
I played Demo 1's version of Descent, and I don't have great memories of it.
It was really hard to get your head around how it controlled, because you could just, it was omnidirectional, and quite tough. Whilst I was looking it up, because I couldn't remember I'd played Descent or Descent 2, I just remember them being very difficult. There was a remake that never seemed to go anywhere. It was announced in 2018. You know, occasionally you particularly if it's a game that's slightly off the beaten track, much like Descent, and you're kind of, you know, doing your basic online searching about it, and all you can find is, you know, time-stamped from a couple of years ago announcements of something, and it's actually really, really hard work to work out whether it came out or not, and you know, there'll be like one review on Metacritic. So yeah, there was going to be a remake, and it was going to be ported to the Switch, and I think the Xbox One. But I don't think all I saw was a trailer. I don't think it actually came out.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is a shame. So
I mean, 2018 is quite a short time for a cycle. So maybe there's still hope yet.
I think it was due out in 2018.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Maybe Sin. That was good. And then Colony Wars was perhaps one of my favourites when I really got into this genre. So there were 3 Colony Wars games on the PlayStation. And they were great. A mix of dogfighting in space and your classic smorgasbord of land-based options, right? Find the thing. So the ship went off and we've not heard from it. Go and find the thing, escort the thing, and then shoot the things. Those tend to be, or protect the thing. Those are the 4 staples.
Yeah.
Of your planet-based combat. So I didn't play the middle Colony Wars, but I did play the first Colony Wars and Colony Wars Red Sun, which was probably my favourite. Sadly, that was part of the Psygnosis sci-fi future universe, I guess. So
yeah.
Colony Wars. I think Colony Wars, G Police, and Wipeout were maybe set in the same universe. I think. Interesting. And then now, pretty much all of those are dead, including Wipeout. Sadly. But yeah, Colony Wars was really great. I actually had a go at putting together a fairly decent story. I can't remember what it was now, but it's one of those games. Colony Wars Red Sun's one of those games where I remember the day rather than the game in particular. So me and Chuff Sims 2, as young lads, went into town. I picked it up and then played the whole game through over a day, whilst he was sitting playing one of the Civilization games on PlayStation. That was a great day.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Colony was a good staple space game. Has almost everything from that list. Customization, shield management. Yeah, really good. Much later, Randy McSporran dropped it and stood on it, and so there's a huge scratch on the disc. So now it still plays, but there's no sound.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. It bugs me every time I plug it in. Star Fox is another game on my list. I think we already talked about this in another podcast.
Yeah.
You hadn't played it very much, is that right?
I remember playing the SNES version, but it was never one that I owned. So it was always like I think it was played at a friend's house sort of thing, and I just don't remember it like particularly well. I just remember like floating giant face that you shoot, and that's about it really. I don't know if I had that much hands-on experience with it.
That's pretty much it. That's the one that's filed under rail shooter on the Wikipedia.
Oh, okay.
Genres.
But you can do a barrel roll.
You can do a barrel roll, and you can sort of change the ship configuration as well with the purple things that go up and down depending on what you're doing. Again, a shout out for Star Fox 64 3D on the 3DS, which had one of the best competitive things on the 3DS, I think, which was just dogfighting. So yeah, it's a really interesting, or completely different prospect when you're dogfighting against other people than when you're kind of dogfighting the AI.
Oh yeah,
because it's just really fucking difficult.
Really is.
Know
like
what they're doing.
When you're dogfighting the AI, you're basically trying to work out what's the pattern, how often, like how can I just hold fire until I can shoot them and defeat the pattern. Whereas when it's against a human, like fuck that, man. That's a tough bat.
You're both fully aware. okay, the other player's got the middle of the screen, so as long as I stay out of their middle of the screen, they can't shoot me. And so you just fold over each other endlessly. Good fun though. Then I guess we'll come on to the Switch triple, which I'm currently playing. So I think I mentioned, maybe it was pre-podcast, a game called Manticore, and that is one of those ports from mobile game.
Yeah, and that's on the Switch, isn't it?
That's now on the Switch. It's fine. It's pleasant. It's very clearly a mobile port, but it's a nice thing to kind of just bash through. And at the time, I was waiting for Everspace, which is a port. I think it was a Kickstarter game, maybe on PC. So it is a spaceship game, which borrows elements from lots of different games. So it's a bit like Star Fox in that you have a galaxy map, and using whatever hyperspace portals, you jump from one kind of system to another system. But you have to manage your fuel, because it takes fuel to make those jumps. So it's like Star Fox in that respect, but then it's also it's self-described as a roguelike. So there are things for you to pick up, there are people for you to do missions for, and then when you get wiped out, you go back to the beginning, but then you keep some of your currency and some of the gear that you picked up, and then eventually you make better and better ships and you can get further. That's really fun, and that's one that I put on when you're faced with options paralysis. That's what I've got. So between this one, there are a couple of other roguelikes when you can't work out what to play, but I'll do a few runs of this. So yeah, Everspace, I really enjoyed. Although I think I mentioned this before, it's clearly a PC port. You know how you can just sense sometimes that something's a PC port?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very clearly a PC. It feels a bit cold and sterile on a joypad, and takes some reminding myself when I pick it up again.
I mean, that is a fucking quote and a half there, by the way. You can sense when it's a PC port because it's cold and sterile on the control pad. That is fucking brilliant, man. We need to fucking tweet that, I know we'll forget to, but we can do that. Yeah. That's great.
You put it on. You're like, nah, I shouldn't be playing this. In the living room on the comfortable settee. I need to go in the garage and play it on a laptop to get that real authentic PC gaming feel.
Oh dear.
Recommend Everspace. But it took. This is why I was talking about it. That was another one of those games where I think a Switch port was a stretch goal, and so it was just ages of nothing. It was in the background of a sizzle reel on a Nintendo Direct, when they say, look at some indies we're working with. And then it was just months of waiting with no news about whether it would come out or not. So in order to scratch that itch, I think Manticore's £5, so I picked up Manticore. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I say, not really any standout moments. And then eventually picked up Everspace. Which I enjoyed a lot, and is in theory infinite spaceship gaming. There's like this huge tech tree, and like all roguelike games, it's just brutal. So you just die the first 6 or 7 times. Yeah, a lot. And then things start to open up, and then you start to see more, and then you find, you buy scanners for your ship, which allows you to then start scanning alien life, and then there's a guy who's collecting aliens, scanning life, and then that leads to a different story. So kind of midway through that. Very good ship customization as well. You can buy, if you build up enough currency, you can buy different builds of ships, but you also invest your money in all the little bits and pieces that go with it. So that's cool. I recommend Everspace. And then the last one of the Switch, I'm calling the Switch Spaceship game trilogy, is Starlink, which I've talked about many times before and have picked up on the PlayStation.
Yeah, but the last time we talked about it, you just got it on the PlayStation 4.
Yeah. And I am.
A game's so good, you're going to buy it on multiple platforms.
Yeah, and playing it through. So it's very, very quickly, because I know we've mentioned it before. It was a very strange Toys to Life spaceship game from Ubisoft, and the Toys to Life side of things are you have the elements are a ship, a pilot, the ship wings, and then the weapons. Depending on the weapons, you can create different combos. So you've got like a fire weapon and an ice weapon. If you hit an enemy with both of those, you do thermal shock, and so all of those different combos. And considering the Toys to Life, you're kind of wrenching in and out. There's a different doohickey that attaches to your controller depending on when you're playing on the PlayStation or the Switch. So the Switch, you slot the Joy-Cons in, and then your ship thing sits on almost like a little lectern on top. With the PlayStation 4 version, it plugs into the front of your controller. It isn't unwieldy as it looks. Essentially, you've got a controller with a thing coming out, and you've got like a little toy spaceship that sits on top of that. So the Toys to Life thing is really, really well done, really high quality. None of them are broken so far, and you are whipping them in and out quite a bit. It's also completely unnecessary. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they did it. They're nice things to have and hold and kind of build, and you can kind of do ridiculous things. If you want, you can put your weapons on backwards. If you want, you can have a ship which has 8 different wings on it, and it will model that in game. It doesn't really change much, and the game itself is really enjoyable and has that thing which I've mentioned a number of times before, where you can kind of take off from the surface of a planet and then you're into space. And I think that's always a really difficult thing to manage, because, as we both know, the true vastness of space is boring.
Yes, very, very much so.
You don't. So yeah. Nailing a kind of fun space reality, I think, is quite tricky, and Starlink does it very well. So within seconds, when you take off from the surface of a planet, you are then in orbit. It is seamless, and you can kind of jump back down. So it's not like you just hit a loading screen which covers up the transition. You can fly very high above the planet, just on the margins of the stratosphere, and then it is a ball ache to get from one side. If you were to go straight from one side of the galaxy to the side of the galaxy, but it's like a couple of hour ball ache if you don't boost, rather than set it going and come back in 5 years to unlock fast travel in order to get from one side to the other.
And I think that sort of brings it back to Frontier Elite 2 as well, and like I don't know what you achieved really in that game, but I found that playing it for like a couple of hours, managing to buy something from one space station, successfully fly to another space station, dock with it without crashing and dying, sell those things, and ultimately like buy a shield for my ship was enough for me. I don't think you could do much more. It was the Amiga. I don't think you could have like saves of progress and things like that. But I also remember like I would load it up and sometimes just go far to other different galaxies or solar systems or whatever like that, and you would just, the vastness of space, as you say, is fucking boring. If there's nothing there, and quite often most of the game is empty, there was just nothing to do. I don't even really remember if there was anything to achieve in that game beyond just selling things and successfully docking at a space station without destroying yourself. Do you?
No, I don't. I just remember them being ridiculously popular, and I think surprisingly popular, considering ostensibly that's all you're doing. And it is a problem that I think a couple of different developers have had a go at dealing with, right? So Eve is one that we mentioned, which is very much, in that realistic, tries to realistically capture the vastness of space. You can spend days. I've read there's a really fun article about sometimes people get stuck in deep space.
Really?
So they go so far, and I think they don't have enough fuel to get back or something, and so they then go to the Eve community, and then there's this phenomenal rescue effort to try and rescue people in deep space, and I think No Man's, which is really cool. That is a thing, as you would say, and then I think in No Man's Sky they've also tried to, with the infinite procedural galaxy universe that can go on and on and on and on and on. So yeah, teasing at the fringes of creating, essentially creating your own universes within games.
Yeah.
So I think that's it.
I think we've reached our sort of edge of space.
Infinite edges of space.
Yeah, exactly. On a lighter note, here's the end of the podcast.
Rescuing.
Or just die in deep space,
I think one fun thing to end on. There aren't necessarily spaceships that you can play in spaceship games, but what are some of your favourite spaceships from games?
What are some of my favourite spaceships from games? Now, I'm immediately, I remember thinking about Rogue Squadron and all of the cheat spaceships you could get. So you could put in cheats, classic style, like up, down, left, right, BA, all that sort of stuff. And you could get the Millennium Falcon. You could get the Naboo Starfighter, and that was quite impressive because it was literally when episode 1 was just about to come out, sort of thing. And you could also, once you'd unlocked the Millennium Falcon with a cheat, you could then use another cheat to turn it into a car. So it was kind of like a sort of a precursor to the Harry Potter flying car thing. As you're doing that, not really a favourite ship of any kind, but I think it was it just immediately struck me as something fun. Beyond that, I don't know. I feel that a lot of ships, they don't, like you were sort of saying, there is a sort of point where the character of the ship, or the ship becomes a character in its own. I don't know if I've really kind of felt that with a lot of other games, and I suppose, I can't really think of any that really stick out in my head as a great character in itself.
It's a great character. One of my ones, which isn't, unfortunately, you don't ever get to fly it as a spaceship, but is Samus's little ship particularly from Metroid Prime. I mean, I think it's in most of the games. So it's her ship, which kind of looks like a mask.
Oh, right, okay.
It looks like her flat mask, and it you descend from it in Metroid. But what I really liked about, I think, Metroid Prime 3 is you could, and I always love it when you can do this, although largely it's pointless. You could hop it inside your ship, and so in Metroid Prime 3 you could move it around from location to location. I just really like the fact that you could hop inside your ship and see some of the HUD, and because it was on the Wii and everything on the Wii had some Mii integration, if you did really well in that game, you could unlock a little bobblehead of your Mii that sat on the dashboard.
That's brilliant.
of Samus's ship. So I remember doing that and taking photos. Shout outs to Samus's ship. I'm not even sure it has a name. And then the other game, which your ship plays a huge role, is in Warframe. So your ship is essentially your hub, but you never. Although I'm not kept up to date to it, so maybe there is a mode where you fly it around. It's quite big, and there are different sections which different rooms which you unlock as you go. But every time you go back to the hub, you kind of go back to what is essentially your cockpit, and just a really nice touch of detail is you can kind of see out through like a giant windscreen, as it were, and depending which planet you're outside of, you'd see different things happening outside the windscreen, which was always really nice. And you could customize absolutely everything about it. The inside colours, even though you'd never see them, the outside colours, detailing panels, and then through in-game currency you could buy fish tanks, posters, bobbleheads to decorate them. So yeah, that was always nice. Kind of coming back to your ship at the end of a mission. I think those are my two spaceship shout-outs for non-spaceship game spaceships, I guess.
Yeah.
I think we've said the word spaceships enough.
Spaceship.
It's a spaceship. It's starting to sound weird.
Spaceship.
Spaceship. I've been spaceship. You've been.
I've been spaceship.
And that's spaceship for spaceship.
Spaceship.
Space.